My dad raised his glass and said, "I'm proud of all my children except the loser." I stood up and walked out. No, that's not the moment this story begins. The real beginning was quieter, crueler. It was Thanksgiving morning, and we were at Gate B6. My grandmother, Lillian, clutched a white envelope like it held the world inside. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, then paused. Empty. "Emma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He said, "There was no ticket for me." I looked at my father, Charles Whitmore, as he turned away from her without flinching, like she was a typo in his plans. Like the $20,000 she gave them meant nothing. And maybe to him. It never did. They boarded the flight to Europe, laughing, smiling, like nothing was missing, but something was. We stayed behind. Me and her. I never regretted it. 3 weeks later, they strolled through international arrivals at Boise Airport, full of Parisian souvenirs and fake charm, and froze, because I was standing there, next to a man in a dark gray suit, and in his hand was a folder that would unravel everything. This is the story of betrayal, of a woman who gave everything, and of what happens when someone finally says, "Enough." Growing up, I never felt like I belonged to the Whitmores. Not really. Our family photos said otherwise, those stiff, polished portraits with everyone in coordinated outfits, forced smiles stretched thin, but inside those frames, I was always on the edge. My father, Charles, was a high-profile real estate agent, obsessed with appearances. His wardrobe was mostly designer suits and power ties. His love language, tax write-offs, and shallow praise when the neighbors were watching. My mother, Deborah, was the queen of passive aggression, all Pilates schedules and gluten-free hosting platters. If you asked her how I was doing, she'd smile tightly and say, "She's figuring it out even when I wasn't lost." Family dinners were more like rehearsals. We sat at a glass table so clean it looked untouched and exchanged lines like actors. "How was your day?" "Fine." "You should really do something about your hair, Emma." Silence. But there was one place, one person who felt like home. Grandma Lillian, my dad's mother. A retired school teacher who lived in a modest one-story home in Meridian with ivy climbing the porch and wind chimes that sang in the Idaho breeze. Every summer she opened her door to me like it was always meant to swing my way. While my parents jetted off on adult-only cruises or business retreats, I stayed with her. We made cinnamon bread from scratch, watered her proud patch of hydrangeas, and painted rocks we'd hide around town. Some days we'd just sit on her porch swing, wrapped in a blanket as she hummed old Billie Holiday tunes under her breath. I remember being 7 and crying because my cousin Brooke had a big birthday party and I wasn't invited. Grandma didn't say a word. She just brought out a small canvas, set it in front of me, and said, "Let's paint how you feel." When my parents yelled at me for getting a B in math, she ran her fingers through my hair and whispered, "Grades measure numbers, not worth." She kept every birthday card I made her, every wobbly crayon drawing, every spelling test I passed. Her fridge wasn't covered in magnets, it was covered in me. Even after I graduated and started working as a nurse in Boise, I never missed a weekend visit if I could help it. Sometimes I'd just show up with groceries and she'd act like I brought her the moon. With Grandma, I never had to earn love. It was just there, always. And deep down, I think my parents resented that. They never said it. They didn't have to. I saw it in my father's jaw when Grandma praised me in front of him, or in the way Mom's smile twitched whenever I chose Thanksgiving at Grandma's instead of Aspen. I ignored it. For years, I brushed it off, told myself I was being paranoid. But part of me always feared that one day when they realized she loved me unconditionally, they'd try to take it from her. I didn't expect them to take everything. It started like any other Thanksgiving. I arrived at Grandma's house early, helped her mash potatoes, while she told me about a neighbor's cat who kept sneaking into her garden. She wore her favorite apron, the one with fading sunflowers, and played her old jazz vinyls on repeat. I remember the way the house smelled nutmeg vanilla roasted turkey, the kind of scent that lives in your memory long after the meal is gone. Then they arrived. My parents, Aunt Dana, my cousins Brooke and Tyler. They came in like a reality show, cast loud, distracted, over-accessorized. Charles wore a blazer that still had the dry cleaning tag attached. Mom floated through the living room in heels that were too expensive for Idaho, but they were nice. Too nice. Dad hugged Grandma quickly but noticeably. Aunt Dana brought a pecan pie from some fancy bakery. Brooke and Tyler even grunted greetings between scrolls on their phones. Something was off. I felt it in the way Dad's laugh lingered a little too long. In the way Aunt Dana called the casserole delightful 3 times. In the way my father said between bites of turkey, "Wouldn't it be amazing if we all took a trip together? Europe," he said, "all of us. One unforgettable adventure." Grandma's eyes widened. "Oh, that sounds lovely, but I'm not sure my knees could handle all that walking." "That's the beauty of it," Dad beamed. "We take it slow. Hotels with elevators, room service, wheelchairs if needed. You'd have your own seat, of course." Mom leaned in. "You've never been out of the country, Lillian. Isn't it time?" Even the kids chimed in half-heartedly. "Yeah, cool idea." I remember Grandma stirring her tea slowly, her fingers circling the rim like she was grounding herself. And then Dad dropped it. "All we need is a little help with the booking, deposits. The rest is on us." I felt my pulse skip. How much I asked, voice flat. 20, he said casually. 1,000. Grandma hesitated, just for a moment. Then she smiled, soft, tentative. "If it brings everyone together, it's worth it." I should have said something. Should have stood up, thrown my napkin down, called out the manipulation happening right there at her mahogany table. But she looked so hopeful, like a child who was finally being picked for the team. She called the bank the next morning. I heard her giving them her account number while I stood in the hallway, hands shaking. All I asked was, "Are you sure she smiled? They're finally including me, that's worth every penny," and I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But the way Dad hugged her goodbye that night, quick, distracted, no eye contact, left me cold. This wasn't inclusion. It was extraction. And Grandma didn't see it. Not yet. Grandma was ready before anyone else. The morning of the flight, she stood by the front door, suitcase in hand, already wearing her navy cardigan with the gold buttons and those soft black flats she always called her travel shoes, even though they hadn't touched an airport floor in over a decade. "I packed light," she said proudly, almost sheepishly. "Didn't want to slow anyone down." Her suitcase was so small it looked like she was just going away for a weekend. She had even curled her hair that morning. I remember the scent of her rosewater perfume, faint and familiar. I tried to smile back to match her quiet excitement, but the pit in my stomach had only grown heavier with each hour. Something was off, deeply off, but I said nothing. I just helped her into the car. At the airport, things moved fast, too fast. Dad took charge like a man possessed, barking directions, checking passports, sighing dramatically when Aunt Dana fumbled her boarding pass. Mom hovered around the duty-free kiosks, already scanning prices on designer sunglasses. No one asked Grandma if she needed help. No one held her hand. I stayed close to her, guiding her through the wide, unfamiliar corridors. She kept looking around in awe, her eyes wide with wonder. "I've never seen an airport this big," she whispered. "Look at those departure boards." As we approached the international check-in counter, something in Dad's posture shifted. He leaned in to speak with the airline clerk, voice, tight eyes darting. I stepped closer just in time to hear, "She's not on the manifest. Must be a system error." A chill ran through me. "What's going on?" I asked, already knowing. Dad turned, plastering on his salesman's smile. "There's just a mix-up. Some kind of glitch. Grandma's ticket isn't showing, but we'll figure it out." Behind him, the clerk looked concerned. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no booking under her name, just the 6 others." Grandma stepped forward, confused. "But I paid. I gave you the money. You said Dad cut her off. It must have been a website issue. These things happen all the time." Aunt Dana stepped in like she was delivering bad news to a child. "Maybe it's for the best, Mom." That flight's long. Europe is a lot of walking. You said your knees were aching, remember? Grandma blinked. Her grip on her suitcase tightened. Her knuckles were white. But I paid. She whispered again, this time more fragile. My father smiled wider. And because of your generosity, we're all going. We'll bring you back souvenirs, pictures, stories. Just rest. That's what you deserve. And just like that, he turned away. No apology, no explanation, no goodbye. They started walking toward the gate. It took me a full 5 seconds to realize what was happening. I stood frozen, staring at the back of my father's blazer, at Aunt Dana's neck pillow, bouncing with each step at Brooke and Tyler, already taking selfies near the duty-free perfume section. It wasn't a mistake. They never planned to take her. Grandma still stood in front of the counter, stunned. Her eyes flicked from the clerk to me, to the boarding gate, ahead where the people she called family were disappearing. "There's no ticket for me," she murmured. It wasn't a question, it was a realization, a breaking. My throat clenched, my vision blurred, but my voice was steady. "Then I'm not going either." Her head snapped toward me. "Emma, no. You've been dreaming of this trip." "Not without you," I said. She tried to protest. "You deserve no." And that was it. While they boarded a luxury flight to Europe with her money, we walked back through the airport doors. Outside, the November wind hit us like truth. Cold. Undeniable. The drive home was silent. She stared out the passenger window, her suitcase on her lap, hands folded. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just faded. Like someone who'd been erased. Like someone who finally realized they had never been seen at all. When we got back, she walked straight to her favorite chair, set her suitcase down, and unzipped it. Slowly, carefully, one sweater, a bottle of lavender lotion, a passport that had never been used. I stood in the kitchen unsure of what to say. Should I rage for her scream break things? Instead, I made her a cup of chamomile tea. When I returned, she was holding a photo of her and Aunt Dana on a beach. Decades old, worn edges. Her smile in that photo was fearless free. "I really thought they meant it," she whispered. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe past the lump in my throat. Later that night, I sat alone at the table while she slept. My laptop glowed in the dark. I typed 4 words: Elder Financial Abuse Laws, Idaho. Pages appeared. Statutes. Statistics. Red flags. Words like coercion and exploitation. A hotline number. A link to the Office of Elder Protection. I clicked it, then copied the number into my phone. The next morning, she was in the garden trimming her rose bush like nothing happened, like humiliation could be pruned away with dead leaves. I brought her a mug of coffee. "You don't have to pretend," I said softly. She gave a tired smile. "I'm not pretending. I just don't want to make it harder for you." "It already is," I admitted. "But doing nothing, that's harder." She looked down at the petal in her palm. "They're still my children." I took a breath. "You're my family, and I'm not letting them get away with this." She didn't respond, but that night when the house was quiet and the stars hung heavy over Meridian, I made the call. Office of Elder Protection. "This is Victor Hensley. How can I help you?" I told him everything. And for the first time since that airport, I didn't feel helpless. Victor Hensley didn't sound like a lawyer on the phone. He sounded like someone who'd seen this before. Too many times. He let me talk, didn't interrupt once, not even when I started crying halfway through my story. Then in a steady voice, he said, "Emma, I need to meet your grandmother." When he arrived the next afternoon, he didn't wear a suit, just a soft gray blazer jeans and a button-down shirt with slightly frayed cuffs. He brought no briefcase, just a manila folder and a gentle expression, the kind that doesn't try too hard. He shook Grandma's hand like she mattered. She looked confused, nervous, maybe even a little ashamed. She served him tea in her chipped sunflower mug, the one she always used when she needed comfort. Her fingers trembled slightly as she placed it on the coaster. Mrs. Whitmore Victor said, settling into her floral armchair, Emma told me what happened at the airport. I know this isn't easy to talk about, but I need you to understand that what your family did, it wasn't just hurtful. It may be illegal. Grandma flinched. I don't want trouble, she whispered. They're my children. Victor nodded, his voice calm. And you're their mother. But the law is clear. When a senior is coerced, misled, or manipulated into transferring assets under false pretenses, that's financial exploitation, and you deserve protection. She looked at me, her eyes searching. For permission. For strength, I held her gaze. They lied to you, Grandma. They used your love to steal from you. That's not family, that's fraud. She didn't speak for a long moment, just sat there, her teacup rattling slightly against the saucer. Then finally she set it down with both hands and said, If Emma believes this is right, then I trust her. That was all we needed. Victor handed her a form, a basic consent to initiate a legal review. She signed it without hesitation. The next few days moved like a quiet storm. We visited her bank in downtown Meridian. Sharon, the branch manager, turned pale when we explained what happened. She'd known Grandma for years and said softly, She came in with the check already written out. I asked if she was sure. She printed the records for us, clear as day, a $20,000 transfer to an account under Charles Whitmore, labeled Trip Fund. From there, we went to the airport. I didn't think we'd get far, but we found Marissa, the same young woman who handled our check-in that day. She had box braids, silver hoop earrings, and a photographic memory. Oh yeah, she said, her brow furrowing. I remember that older woman. She looked lost. Her son kept saying she wasn't well enough to travel, told us to delete her reservation and said she decided not to go. But it felt wrong. Victor gave her his card. She agreed to submit a written statement. Each piece made it harder to breathe but easier to move. We returned home with a folder full of documents, the transfer receipt, witness names, printed emails from the travel agency confirming only 6 travelers were booked, all paid in full from one account, Grandma's. That night, I helped Victor scan and organize everything. Grandma made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup like it was just another Tuesday. But I saw the change. She didn't flinch when Victor used legal terms like civil damages or probate injunction. She even raised an eyebrow when he mentioned a possible restraining order. Maybe it's time, she said while slicing tomatoes, they realized I'm not just some wallet in a rocking chair. Victor smiled. You're not. You're a witness. And a fighter. She laughed short and dry. You sound like Emma. For the first time in weeks, the air in the house felt lighter. Later that evening, we sat together in the living room. The lights dimmed. A Billie Holiday record played soft in the background. Grandma was flipping through an old photo album. She paused on one photo, her and Grandpa in front of a VW van, both smiling, barefoot young. I used to think if I was generous enough, they'd love me, she said softly. I thought giving was how you kept family together. I leaned against her shoulder. Love doesn't take everything, it gives back. She closed the album and whispered, Then maybe it's time I stop giving to people who never gave anything back. Victor returned 2 days later with a decision. I've spoken to the Office of Elder Protection and a family court judge, he said. We're proceeding with civil action for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and we're filing a petition for inheritance suspension, pending a full review. Grandma blinked. Inheritance? Yes, Victor said gently. Your estate, if this had gone unaddressed, your children would have benefited financially from exploiting you. But not anymore. Not without consequences. She didn't respond right away. Then she looked up and said clearly, Do what needs to be done. We spent the next few days quietly preparing for something enormous. Victor pulled flight itineraries and travel receipts from the booking company. Grandma gave us old birthday cards from Charles and Dana, proof of handwriting to help verify documents. She even dug out her will from a filing cabinet under her bed. I didn't realize how hard this was for her until one night I found her in the kitchen alone staring at the old photo of her 3 children on the fridge. I kept thinking one day they'd come back, she said. I didn't ask what she meant. I knew. Instead, I said, they might, but not for you, for what you have left. She didn't cry. She just nodded. And that night, she called her old estate attorney, Mr. Hendricks. I listened from the hallway as she said I'd like to update my will. Yes, completely. No portion to Charles. No portion to Dana. They've had enough. The next morning, Victor showed up in a darker suit. He carried a sealed envelope, crisp and official. Emma, he said, we're ready. Ready for what I asked. He glanced toward the porch window where Grandma was clipping dead leaves from her rose bush. For when they come back. The day they returned, the sky over Boise was gunmetal gray. I didn't tell Grandma I was going. She was outside that morning, pruning her rosebush like always. She handed me a shopping list, eggs, milk, lemon balm tea, completely unaware of what I'd planned. I kissed her cheek, pocketed the list, and whispered, I'll be back soon. At the airport, I stood by the arrivals gate, pulse steady but heart wired like static. Victor was beside me, calm as a glacier in his sharply tailored charcoal suit. He held a plain manila folder tucked under one arm. Inside our entire case, bank statements, signed testimony from the airline staff, copies of the wire transfer labeled Family Trip Fund, the court-approved summons, every lie printed and preserved. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Then, there they were. Dad appeared first, pushing 2 oversized suitcases plastered with Paris and Rome stickers, grinning like a man returning from conquest. Mom followed, perfectly styled, blowout, flawless nails, glossy rose. Aunt Dana trailed with oversized sunglasses, still on, snapping selfies with Brooke and Tyler, who were giggling over something on TikTok. They looked untouched, triumphant. Until they saw me, their steps faltered. Mom lowered her sunglasses. Brooke's jaw twitched. Tyler looked confused. Dad's smile collapsed like wet paper. I stepped forward. Victor followed. Charles Whitmore. Victor said, his voice slicing through the noise of the terminal. Dana Brooks, these are for you. He handed each of them an envelope. They didn't take them right away. Dad blinked, confused. What? Is this legal summons? Victor replied calmly. You are being investigated for the financial exploitation of Mrs. Lillian Whitmore. You are required to respond within 7 business days. Failure to do so will result in civil penalties. Aunt Dana ripped off her sunglasses. Are you serious? Victor didn't flinch. Completely. She gave us that money, Dana snapped. We didn't trick her. She wanted us to have it. She gave it, I said, because you lied to her. You promised her a seat on that plane. You smiled, took her money, and then left her standing at the gate like trash. That's not a gift. That's fraud. My mother stepped forward now. She's old. That trip would have killed her. You think she could walk the streets of Paris? She needed rest. I stared her down. Then why didn't you tell her that before you cashed her check? No answer. Just silence thick enough to choke on. My father's voice cracked low and hard. Emma, you did this. I nodded once. Yes, you're suing your own family. His face twisted with outrage. No, I said evenly. I'm protecting the only person in this family who still remembers what love is. You've always been dramatic, Dana sneered, always playing the victim. Victor stepped between us. This conversation is over. You'll receive further instructions from the probate court within the week. Any retaliation will be documented. We turned and walked away. But before I left, I looked back just once. And for the first time in my life, I saw it. They weren't angry. They weren't smug. They were scared. In Grandma's favor. Full restitution. $20,000 to be returned within 30 days. But it didn't stop there. The evidence of intentional deception, emotional harm, and financial coercion triggered something deeper. The court froze all inheritance claims tied to Lillian's estate. Victor filed a formal petition for inheritance revocation, a rarely used legal mechanism that, when justified, removes individuals from estate distribution due to proven misconduct. 3 weeks later, the order was signed. My father, my aunt, and their spouses were officially disinherited. Not a penny, not a percentage, not a framed photo from the attic. When I brought the court papers home, Grandma was sitting at the kitchen table with her favorite tea, Earl Grey, 3 sugars. She held the papers in her hands like they were made of porcelain. "They really did this," she said, her voice soft, not disbelief, more like confirmation. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said. She looked up at me and smiled, a small smile, but clear, lighter than anything I'd seen on her in weeks. "No, sweetheart. I'm sorry I let it go on this long." That night she made another call. Her voice was steady this time. "Mr. Hendricks, yes, I'd like to make an official change to my will. Remove Charles and Dana completely. Yes, no portion, no exceptions. They've had enough." She paused. "Add Emma, full medical proxy and financial advocate." Later that evening, we sat on the porch with mugs of cocoa watching the wind play with the wind chimes. "I'm not doing this out of anger," she told me. "I just want peace. And peace means not giving people more chances to hurt you." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Then let's make peace permanent." In the following days, we moved with quiet efficiency. We closed the old joint account she'd shared with Dad, opened a protected trust in her name. Victor helped set up legal safeguards. Every document was notarized, filed, locked in a fireproof drawer. She insisted I be listed as trustee. "I trust you," she said, "not because you're blood, but because you saw me. That's what family means." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Some days later, she stood at the edge of her garden, holding a sketchbook. "I signed us up for watercolor class," she said. "You're coming." I laughed. "Are you threatening me with art?" She grinned. "It's never too late to start again." And it wasn't. Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster than usual, and in its place came soft, wet soil and early tulip buds, yellow ones just like Grandma loved. When I was 8, she once told me that yellow tulips didn't just mean joy, but hope. Joy comes and goes. She said, but hope is what you keep alive even when everything else fades. I never forgot that. So that April, I planted an entire row along her fence line. Dozens of bulbs pushed deep into the soil with my bare hands, fingertips frozen, heart steady. I didn't tell her. I wanted it to be a surprise. By May, they were blooming a golden sea against the weathered white picket fence. When she saw them standing in her worn cardigan mug in hand, she didn't say a word, just stared for a long while, then reached out and squeezed my hand. "I figured you needed something to look forward to," I said. She didn't look at me when she answered. "I already do, honey. You." That was the moment I knew the healing had begun. Not just legally, not just financially, but inside her, in the places no court ruling could ever reach. That summer, I made a decision. I applied to Idaho State University's graduate program in gerontology and elder advocacy. After everything we'd lived through, I knew I wanted to make a life out of fighting for people like her. People who had no one, or worse, had everyone but were still invisible. I told her in late July. She cried, the soft kind, the proud kind. "I always knew you'd take care of people," she said. "I just never imagined you'd start with me." I smiled through tears. "You're the reason I even know how to care. Life didn't become perfect, but it did become real." Grandma started painting again. Watercolors, mostly simple ones. Birds, sunflowers, her old rocking chair. One she painted was called Gate B6. She never explained it, but I didn't need her to. Sometimes she sold them at local craft fairs. Her painting teacher, Mr. Bowers, a retired firefighter, became her coffee buddy. Sharon from the bank stopped by every few weeks with fresh rolls from the bakery. And Marissa from the airport sent flowers on Grandma's birthday with a card that read, "She mattered," and she did, more than any of them ever knew. Mail still came occasionally. We never opened them. Grandma would simply slide them into a drawer in the hallway. She labeled it unanswered. Then she'd return to her tea, her book, or her sketch. It was her way of choosing silence over resentment. They had their chance, she once told me. They used it to lie. Years passed like a gentle tide. My classes were hard but purposeful. Every time I sat in a lecture about policy change or read a case file of elder neglect, I thought of her, of what we'd survived, of what she taught me to listen for what isn't said, to speak for those who whisper, and to love without permission. Then one autumn morning, everything stilled. I found Grandma sitting by the window, wrapped in her favorite quilt, the one with all our family birthdays stitched around the border in her crooked embroidery. Her eyes were distant, not worried, just quiet. "I'm a little slower these days," she murmured. I knelt beside her and brushed her silver hair from her face. "The tulips will come back next spring," I said. She smiled. "They always do." 2 weeks later, she passed in her sleep. No hospital, no machines, just peace, just as she always wanted. We buried her on a gentle hill near the lake beneath the old oak tree where she used to read poetry on warm Sundays. I placed a fresh bouquet of yellow tulips on her grave, wrapped in a soft linen ribbon embroidered with her initials, LW. The funeral was small but not empty. Her painting teacher, her friends from watercolor class, Sharon from the bank, the florist who helped her plant spring bulbs. Even Marissa sent a note and a tiny folded paper tulip. It simply read, "She changed how I see people. Thank you for sharing her with us." I stood by her grave long after the others had gone, holding one last tulip in my hand. The wind brushed against my cheek like fingers, and I swear I heard her voice say, "Keep going, Emma, keep blooming." So I did. I graduated with honors, joined the Elder Justice Initiative, and now spend my days investigating cases like hers, teaching care facility staff, visiting homes, writing policies that never existed before. And every year, without fail, I plant more. Some days I sit on the porch with a cup of tea, stare out over that golden fence line, and say the same thing out loud. "You didn't just raise a granddaughter, Grandma. You raised a witness. You raised a fighter. And that's more legacy than anyone else ever left me." Sometimes when I sit on the porch in late afternoon light, I forget she's gone. The house still smells like her lavender sachets. Her painting apron still hangs behind the pantry door, streaked with cerulean and sunflower yellow. The chimes still hum in the breeze like her old humming used to. She's everywhere, not in a haunting way, in a home way. There's a moment every spring, usually mid-April, when the tulips bloom so fast it feels like the ground can't contain them. I watch the petals stretch golden and brave, as if they're reaching for someone they trust will catch them. That's how I remember her. Soft hands. A voice that never yelled. A spine made of steel. People talk about legacies like there's something big. Buildings named after you. Wealth passed down. Statues. But her legacy was simpler, kinder, deeper. It was in every casserole brought to a sick neighbor. Every math grade she reassured me didn't define me. Every person she saw when the rest of the world looked away, and when the people she loved most tried to erase her, to reduce her to a forgotten seat at gate B6, she still chose grace. But I didn't. I chose to act. Not out of vengeance, not out of hate, but because silence would have made me complicit. And love, real love, doesn't stay silent when harm is done. People still ask if I ever forgave, they realize what they threw away. But Grandma taught me something better than forgiveness. She taught me clarity, to know when someone is family in name only, to understand the difference between an apology and a manipulation, to recognize the power in walking away and the even greater power in not looking back. We never reconnected with them. Not really. They sent a few more letters, a birthday card, a wedding invitation that arrived 3 weeks late. Grandma never opened any of it. She just placed it gently in the drawer, labeled unanswered. After she passed, I found the drawer almost full. Some of the envelopes were unopened for over 5 years. She had read their names, nodded, and quietly chosen herself instead. There was poetry in that. She didn't make a scene. She didn't write angry letters or show up at their houses. She just stopped letting them rewrite her worth. And when the time came to write her final words to divide what she had built, she chose love. She chose truth. She chose me. Not because I asked, not because I'm her granddaughter, but because I stayed, because I stood with her when no one else did. Now I help others do the same. At the Elder Justice Initiative, we see cases like hers every week. A retired grandfather coerced into signing over his house to a son who ghosts him once the papers are notarized. A disabled widow whose niece manages her bank account and drains it for spa weekends. An elderly teacher who signs a will while on medication, disinheriting the only people who truly loved her. Every case has one thing in common: silence. Until someone finally says enough. Sometimes that someone is a neighbor, a lawyer, a nurse. Sometimes it's a granddaughter. And if I can be that voice for even one more person, then everything Grandma endured wasn't in vain. Her final painting hangs in my hallway. It's called Gate B6, a simple watercolor of a chair, an envelope, and a single yellow tulip on the ground beside it. No people, just presence. Just a truth that once sat quietly beside betrayal and refused to disappear. I pass it every morning when I leave for work, and I whisper the same words like a promise I saw what they did. I remember who you were. I will never let them forget. Have you ever had to protect someone you loved from your own family? Have you ever watched someone get erased quietly, strategically, heartlessly, just because they were too soft to fight back? If this story reminded you of someone, drop their name in the comments. Share their legacy. Tell us what made them kind, what made them matter. Let's make sure people like Lillian Whitmore are never invisible again. And if no one's told you lately, you're not crazy for walking away. You're not wrong for choosing boundaries. You're not weak for crying. You're strong for surviving. And if you're still in the middle of it, if your family's silence is louder than screaming, just know you're not alone. We see you, and we're still blooming.